Hello everyone, this is Warpster77 tuning into another video, and today I will be reading off to you guys Chapter 16, Leave It All Behind. You'll have to pardon my mother is right here beside me, listening in. Alright. It was October 20th, and Saber was sitting in his office with Ragotha. I still think it's a trap. None of the scouts we sent to Ollie ever reported seeing any signs of their activity, Ragotha said as he leaned back in his chair. Exactly. If they were going there to throw us off, then the surrounding scouts will be there at any given time. The cemetery is close by Ollie, so where else could they have run off? We have Harp under control as well as Verdun, so they are trapped. Today we finish off the Archangels, and there are some eagles heading to the cemetery. We will have them caught in our trap as well, Saber said, rejoicing with his marvelous plan. Don't underestimate them. I can remember very vividly from the tales I heard from last year that the OTE team was very strong and resilient. I can assume they will show their tenacity here, the figure in the shadows of the corner of the office said. Saber retorted, We are well aware of your concerns. You made them very clear 2 days ago when we first heard the message. Now, you remember our deal then, as well. Yes, we'll capture Sniper Viper at all costs, but I would like to know why. I'm not going to tell you, because you will simply do it without questioning my motives again. Saber rolled his eyes. Whatever you say. I'm just saying, it's not best to keep secrets from your teammates. You are not my teammate. You are a tool. Do you think this position was given to me under my consent? Saber shrugged. I thought you chose the team you thought would win. You thought wrong. Seeing there was no point in continuing the conversation, Saber turned back to Ragotha. I understand most of your wolves were killed on those attack days, so I can assure you that I'm sending E2 and his teams over there to handle it. Ragotha spoke up. Nano was the commander, and he is being dealt with for those losses as we speak. But to be honest, I wasn't expecting them to put up such a fight, considering most of them who went over to the Archangels were little kids around 12 to 13. Always expect the unexpected, and that's what we are doing here today. If you say so, Saber. Ragotha let out a long sigh and bit his bottom lip, which was his telltale sign he was worried. North of the island, in the heart of Ollie Forest, towards Mount Hollow, Riptide and his fellow survivors were making their way over towards the cemetery, just to the west of their location. Rip looked back towards his two other eagles. There was Garuk, who was small and scrawny with brown hair and blue autumn shirt. Then there was Volt, who was much taller and stronger with a full set of woodland camouflage. We're almost there, guys. Just a few more minutes and we'll be there, Rip said to them as he reached the crest of a hill with almost no trees. Garuk was quiet for a long time, just silently wondering to himself about all the other eagles. He knew a lot of them died, and he wondered if they were going to be the only ones there to meet Ultra. Garuk, pick up the pace, Volt said as he moved ahead down the hill. Garuk shook out of his daydream and caught back up with Rip and Volt. Do you think it is a trap? Garuk asked. Rip shook his head. It can't be. There is no way Saber got Ultra to spill the beans about our deal. Ultra would rather die than condemn us to a fate like that. Volt agreed and pushed onwards through the forest towards the distant cemetery. Garuk looked over his shoulders, back towards the hill, and then kept walking with the others. In the distance, 4 tall, strong, and silent boys were following the 3 of them. The leader of the LSC fire squad was named Wowier. He carried a MA-4K assault rifle that was standard issue for his squad, except the heavy machine gunner named Reliant. His sniper UN-99 was hanging back watching them from afar to make sure this wasn't a double cross. Gombros, I want you to take out the one in the back when we get a first chance. Make sure he goes down quietly, Wowier said to his second in command. Combros was going to take the shot primarily because the 5.56 suppressor on his MA-4K would make no sound or alert the others 2 of their location. Hold it, another one of Wowier's squad members said as he saw Ewan's flashlight flicker. It was a signal for enemies closing in. "Get me on the radio," Wowers ordered to his other squad mate. He called into E2's main force just south of their position, waiting as a gas station for their order to come in and back them up. "E2, we have visuals on two teams of 3 members, all assumed OTE, since they are heading straight for the cemetery." "Roger. You know the signal. When they have all made it to the cemetery, stall them for 1 minute, and we'll be there," E2 said as he ordered his assault team to load up. A total of 8 members loaded into the scout-class vehicle to tear down the road in a hurry. Closing in on the cemetery, Rip heard movement to his right and saw 3 more kids come through the woods. He instantly recognized one of them with black cowls and a dark mask. "Godly! Over here!" Rip said to him, trying to keep his voice down. The other team of 3 made their way to him and were panting for breath. "We made it. Come on, we need to get inside," Godly said as the other 2 members named Fake Professor and Daniel Hamlot were right behind him. Approaching the walls, they found a large hole in the white wall that led to the south side of the chapel. Moving to the western front towards the entry, Rip noticed they weren't alone. "Come out with your hands up," he said, raising his ASP SMG towards a tombstone. "We're all friendly here," Ultra said as he opened the doors to the chapel. Royd and Mindless stepped out from behind the tombstones, and Warpster watched from inside the chapel. "Glad you can make it," Warpster said with a grin as they started to enter the building. "You have no idea," Fake said as a sniper round went clean through his head. "Target down. They are inside the chapel. I repeat, they are inside," Ewan said over the radio from her vantage point upon the hill. "Get down!" Ultra ordered as another sniper round fired off. "Warpster, what's going on?" Garuk asked as they closed the doors. The room was dark, and the stained glass windows around the chapel had pictures of spinies, relics, and weird depictions of places. The ceiling was high, and there was a ladder that went up towards the bell tower, towards the preacher's stage. Warpster busted a stained glass window to the north side of the chapel and hopped out. Listening closely, he could hear the distant sounds of vehicles approaching. "We need to move, now," Warpster said as he hopped back inside the building. "We can't with that sniper pinning us down," Royd said, looking over towards Fake's corpse. Warpster looked at all of them in the room and then spotted a familiar face that he despised. The face on this person was burned into his memory when he killed him last year in by far one of the most brutal ways recorded in the competition. "You," Warpster said in a low tone. He pointed towards Daniel, and he knew very well why. "What?" Daniel asked as he looked over to Warpster. Rip was confused what was going on between them, but he looked out the south side windows to see 4 LSC troopers walking in through the hole that he originally came through. "Hostiles, inbound!" Rip shouted as the troopers outside shot out the windows. Wower told his team to move up as he made his way around to the front door. Warpster looked at the seat next to him and found a hatchet with a curved handle. The grip was banded with tape, and the whole thing was one solid piece of metal. Warpster saw the door get kicked in, and like an instinct, he threw the axe at the person opening the door. Like the apple back at home, it flew at 140 miles per hour right into Wower's face. The blade made contact and carried over the force to snap his neck as his body fell next to Fake's. Rip put his back against the wall and pulled out his ASP SMG. The others took cover behind the chairs and benches placed in the chapel. Rip stood up and fired half his magazine into the closest LSE trooper there was and dropped him to the crisp, grassy turf. The others couldn't react in time as Garuk shot Combros in the face with his shotgun. Garuk and the others swarmed the last one with heavy pistol fire, and Ewan was ready to take her shot. She hit Mindless in the arm and pulled her bolt back for another round. Royd was by the front of the church next to Fake's corpse and used Fake's sniper rifle to sight in on Ewan. Leveling the sights on her, Royd pulled the trigger and sent a round clean into her ribcage, which left an internal organ a mess. Tissue and blood flew out her back as the muscles tore and her bones shattered. She collapsed to the ground, unable to move. "Die, bitch," Royd said as he looked out the front walls to see 2 cars moving up. "We need to move, now! Warpster said as he saw 2 scouts closing in. Warpster saw that Wower was still fidgeting and trying to grab his weapon. Rip put his foot on the squirming body and fired a round into his face, disabling him and killing him. The passengers of the scouts pulled out Mach 10 machine pistols and sprayed at the kids trying to escape. Everyone fell back inside as E2 instructed 3 members of his squad to secure the back. "You're not escaping this, OTE," he called out. Warpster looked to Royd, who gave him his hatchet back. Warpster, Godly, Royd, and Ultra were hiding in a morgue next to the chapel. Mindless, Garuk, and Rip were still inside, while Volt and Daniel were towards the back of the chapel. Warpster looked over to Ultra and said, "Time to show me if you still remember how to fight like last year." Ultra went wide-eyed. "But this isn't anything like last year. We don't have system boosts, item enhancements, nothing." "You have an advantage over those LSE troopers. They have never seen or felt what we have. You have the advantage because you are a super soldier. We're right here with you, so let's do this," Warpster said as he pumped his shotgun distinctively. LSE troops around the corner heard the pump and moved closer towards the noise, and with their weapons drawn, they closed in on the morgue. Warpster poked through one of the small windows and fired at the first small LSE trooper, which sent him flying backwards. The others instinctively began to fire, sending bullets pinging into the brick wall. Godly had his Mark 23 pistol in hand and fired a round clean through one of the LSE troopers' face guards. Rip heard the bullets coming from outside and jumped through the hole in the window Warpster made and came around the side of the building to see 3 troopers laying down suppression fire from gravestones. Rip fired at the heads poking out from behind the gravestones and hit 2 of them, piercing their helmets. The final one let out a scream of terror as his friend's brains flew out onto his face mask. Trying to scrub them off as he smeared onto his shades, which obscured his vision even more, Ultra took his T11 S15 sleek action pistol and fired a trio of bullets into the flailing kid's back. The holes bore through his chest, causing him to hit the dirt from the force. Still raspily breathing, nothing vital was hit, but he was bleeding heavily. Rip fired another cluster of rounds into the kid's upper torso to finish him off. From the entrance, E2 ordered his command team to sweep it clean. They laid down heavy suppression fire with shotguns and high-caliber 7.62 NATO rounds, battle rifles. Warpster fired a 12-gauge slug at the first one in sight, but was surprised to see him evade the shot and return fire. Rip was shot in the shoulder by a 7.62 and felt his bone break from the force. Biting back pain from the blow, he jumped back inside the chapel for cover. "Garuk, keep us safe until I heal back up." Rip pulled out his T2S2 Colt and held it with his still functioning hand. "Okay, Mindless, just lay low, okay?" Mindless gave a grunt as painkillers kicked in to help alleviate some of the burning pain he felt emanating from his right arm. Back in the morgue, Warpster and Ultra were getting pinned down, with Godly trying to make a break for cover. Godly took in a breath and sprinted for the nearest tombstone to be shot down by a battle rifle hitting him in the lower back. Coming to a skidding halt, Godly landed in the grassy turf just out of sight from the advancing enemies. E2 stepped in from the entrance with a look of satisfaction on his face. "If you won't come out and fight, we'll burn you out," E2 said as he threw a jerry can full of gasoline at the morgue. Warpster heard the sloshing of gasoline pour out onto the dry grass. The LSE troops took a few steps back as E2 leveled his pistol at the can. "Last chance, Ultra. Come out and die with honor, or burn like the cowardly snake you are." Warpster looked to his friend and saw no way out of this until he heard the charging roar of someone new. E2 looked behind him to see 2 more eagles dressed in uniform, olive drab, one tall with the letter E stenciled in on his green shirt, armed himself with a shotgun and blasted 2 of the closest LSE troopers into oblivion. The other was smaller, with jet black hair and tan skin, picked off troops in the back with his Falcon 9 semi-automatic sniper rifle. "What?" E2 said as he rolled to cover. Royd took his chance and ran out of the morgue, firing his rifle rounds into the backs of the distracted adversaries. Ultra finished off the last one before Edwin, the tall charging brute in green with the letter E on his shirt, smashed the butt of his shotgun into E2's head. Warpster walked over to the 2 and smiled. Ultra spoke up to him. "Nice work, Edwin and Cool. You came in just the nick of time." "Glad we can make it too. We saw the guys at the gas station just south of here in an industrial checkpoint and followed them down here, Edwin said as he picked up E2 by the collar and held his throat tightly. Tell me, what is your name? Warpster asked as he approached E2. Like hell I'm telling you. Then let me ask you another question. Do you know me or any of these people? E2 looked around and instantly knew Ultra. I know my targets, Warpster snarled. Then you didn't do enough homework, Warpster said as he pulled out his pistol and fired a round right into E2's skull. Just as Warpster had done so, he heard cries of pain as more gunfire came from the back of the cemetery. There are more reinforcements, Ultra said as he went over to help Godly to his feet. Warpster looked around the building to see Daniel pinned down, and then turned back as E2 started to squirm. Edwin silenced the squirming body and crushed his shotgun butt into the skull, turning him into what you would say Pac-Man. Turning his attention back to Daniel, who was pinned down behind a tombstone by 3 more LSE troopers. One had a Tiger Mark K M machine gun, unloading heavy suppression fire into Warpster's direction. He ducked back behind cover and watched Ultra helping the wounded out of the chapel building. Looking back, he saw the look of helplessness in Daniel's eyes, and he cried out to Warpster. Help me! Please, someone help me! Warpster stared back as a bullet whizzed past his face and burned his cheek. Not even flinching, Warpster kept his gaze locked with his until he heard the words, Warpster, we need to go. Warpster turned back to see Rip, Godly, and Mindless were hurt badly. Then Edwin and Cool were out of ammunition, and then Fake was dead. Glancing back towards Daniel's position, he saw the corpse of Volt crumpled over in a corner face down in the coarse grass. The 3 LSE troopers were closing in on Daniel's position, and he kept crying. Warpster stood back, and he saw he was putting more people at risk, or himself. If they left now, they would never be able to catch them, but they would leave Daniel behind. Warpster looked Daniel in the eyes from his position and remembered just the trauma he inflicted upon Cyril last year. Without taking another second, he turned and ran over to Ultra in the scout vehicle. Drive, was all Warpster said as he took his shotgun. Ultra floored it down the road with Edwin driving the other scout behind him with the wounded. They drove without turning back, but more gunfire could be heard in the distance. Daniel was on the ground with his chest bleeding heavily, with his rifle too far out of reach to even try and crawl to. 2 of his lower ribs were broken and pushed against his lung, making it agony. Each breath, agony. Blood dripped from his mouth, the amount of internal bleeding in his chest due to it. His back was soaking wet from the exit wounds in his lower back, which drenched his black shirt thick with blood. The 3 LSE troopers swept the area clean and reported over the radio back to Saber. Sir, we have a confirmed total of 2 Eagles killed. We have lost over 13 men, including E2. That's impossible! What are you idiots doing? Saber shouted, and Daniel could hear the tone of anger in his voice. He looked over to see a black cloaked figure wearing a cowl, and his skin was painted black, with white rings around his eyes and 2 streaks down his nose. Not only the features of the person petrified Daniel, but also the look he gave him with his piercing yellow eyes. Walking slowly over to the LSE troopers who were completely oblivious of the person's presence, Daniel coughed again. The LSE troopers walked over to investigate the noise and were surprised to see Daniel was still alive. Look what we have here. Maybe if we capture one of them, Saber won't be too pissed at us, one of them said. Wait, what if we take him back and then Saber let out his aggression on the poor sap? Another implied. Daniel wasn't even looking at the 3 boys congregated around him. The only thing that transfixed Daniel was the black cloaked figure slowly approaching the LSE troops from behind. The boys' footsteps were completely masked by their conversation, and Daniel was frozen to the core from the horrifying sight that followed up when the man reached the 3 troopers. Grabbing the first LSE trooper by the neck, he then took the boy's pistol out and fired a round into the next one. The 3rd trooper with the machine gun tried to move the heavy weapon to fire at the cloaked figure, but failed as his friend was shoved into him. The 2 troopers fell on the ground and were frozen with fear as the cloaked figure unsheathed the curved blade with the finest edge they had ever seen. The blade was sleek and masterfully crafted, and the handle was hooked like a claw. It was like lightning just how fast the figure slit the first one's throat, and then plunged the blade deep into the second one's helmet, and penetrated all the way into his brain. The figure pulled out his knife and looked over to the heap of a mess that was Daniel. Picking him up in his arms, the figure took Daniel inside the chapel. Laying him down on the table, the figure began to heal him and replenish his blood meter. "You are with the eagles. I saw them leave you behind. Why is that, my friend?" the hooded kid asked. Daniel was too shocked to speak, but he knew the answer. Was it because they were wounded? Was it because they were afraid? Was it because you weren't good enough? Daniel shook his head and tried to mouth the word. The hooded boy smiled and then said, "Tell me, who was responsible for leaving you to die?" Daniel sat up straight and said in a hoarse voice, "Warpster." The cloaked figure smiled and took the LSE trooper's radio. "Good work, you two. Keep feeding me more incursions. I've got more assets from this battle than you can believe." On the other end of the radio that was being secured from any listeners, a female voice said, "Oh, I have an exact idea of what you got today. 13 loaded LSE soldiers, supplies, and 2 OTE scraps." The cloaked boy shook his head. "No, I've got all of that, and a new friend. Ready for the best news yet?" The voice on the line replied yes. "I've just seen the 6th Archangel, the one who claimed to never have returned," the cloaked figure said to Daniel and smiled, taking his injured body into the woods to somewhere he would not be seen for a long time. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and leave your